Media Center, the Truth Podcast. Your host, the General. We got the Winston back in the house, aka Carson. We got Big John. We got Nikki G. But most important, we have a very special guest today. We got Brian Colon, one of my good friends. He's running for Attorney General. And we're just here live today just to really talk about what's important. Let me tell you what's so important, why I have Brian Colon in here at the Truth Podcast. Number one, I always talk about always building a personal board of directors so that you can pass out issues or even share good stuff, but you need to get people that are subject matter experts better than you in whatever subset they bring to your lives. And I'm going to tell you right now, Brian Colon brings a lot of value to the General and to a lot of his friends, and he's been a mentor to many, many, many individuals. And one thing that I really like about him is that he mentors anybody. I've seen this guy mentor 15-year-old kids to big-time Washington people. So literally, this guy on the spectrum really takes care of that. So for me, he's a spiritual brother to me. He helped me come back to spirituality when I was having a lot of questions in my life. And so I really thank him for that. So you know what? Let's now hold up. Let's introduce to you Brian Colon. He's going to give us a little intro about his life. Brian, welcome to the Truth Podcast. And you know what? In your honor, we got these coffee cups out here because, you know, he does cafecito with Colon. So you know what? We said, you know what? We're going to bring some Truth Podcast cups over here. I just wanted a bigger cup than his. So I made a bigger cup, you know what I mean? But he's still the cafecito with Colon. G2, come on, give us some swag here.
It's great to be here with Jen here at Harmonix Media Group, kicking it live right here on this great afternoon on this beautiful Tuesday, the 5th day of October, right here in the land of enchantment, the Tierra del Encanto, the 47 star on the beautiful flag of the United States of America. My name is Brian Colon. It's my 100th. Let me just say this. I did a lot of practice before I could come on this show. I mean, I did about 300 some odd episodes of Cafecito con Colon before I was qualified to be with that Jen.
No, come on.
I mean, come on. The Truth Podcast, this is heavy duty. This is the big stage. So, look, I'm grateful to be here. I come all the way from Valencia County, growing up as a little mocosito with a lot of love, but not a lot of resources. So my lived experience is one that most New Mexicans are familiar with. It's a lived experience of growing up in poverty. I had two parents who were disabled, and literally as a teenager watched my father deteriorate before my very eyes. He had muscular dystrophy, and he had a dream. He had a dream that I'd be the first in my family to go to college and really break the cycle of poverty. And as I sit here before you today is my 1,007th day as the state auditor of New Mexico, and it's been an honor and privilege to serve. But let me just say this. You know, my father died, he was 49 years old, and I was a teenager. And I watched him die and buried him, but I didn't bury his dream. At 18 years old, I moved down to Las Cruces and decided that I would try and live that dream that he had, that I would go to college and actually graduate. He said he made it through high school because he made it through the front door and through the back door. So he never knew what that looked like to go to college. And he didn't get to live to see me graduate, but in fact I did. And went straight to law school and been practicing law for 20 years now as a licensed attorney in New Mexico. Just had my anniversary of my 20th year of practice, and it's been an amazing journey. And having lived my father's dream, I graduated and then broke that cycle of poverty. One generation out from poverty, my son is a very proud Albuquerque High Bulldog. And Jack, you gave him one of his summer opportunities because he wanted to grow up to be an engineer, and that's exactly what he did. He went to the George Washington University on a presidential scholarship, one generation out from poverty, and he is now a biomedical engineer who's a graduate of the George Washington University.
You know, Brian, I think one of the things about like Raph, it really stood out to me. I gave him one of my watches. You remember that for his graduation. And I told him, you know what, when you get the opportunity to wear this watch, you're going to better be doing big things. And, it was crazy when he came into the office and he says, you know what, it's that hard work ethic, that substitution. And he's applied that, and what's awesome is that that small time I was able to mentor him, but really what you laid the foundation. I think what people don't understand is when you come on and mentor with the General, it's like coming on with the NFL. If you don't have those building blocks, like say playing in the NCAA, you can't mentor the General. It's too hard, right? People burn out because I really set a different level, and I think that's what I really love. One thing I really appreciate about you is you ultimately outdo us in energy. And for you, the general to say that you outdo him in energy is ridiculous. You're the guy that I know that will answer an email at 3 a.m. in the morning. You go to bed later than crap, and I just don't know how you do it. But I think at the end of the day, you know, my question for you, for the public out there listening, what inspires you, Brian? What makes you move? Like, what is that thing? Break that down for us.
Well, I think, you know, I have people ask me that all the time. And really, they don't really ask what inspires me, but they start out with, where do you get your energy? And, you know, I talked about living my father's dream. But here's the deal. Today, for the last 1,007 days, I've been living my childhood dream. Because while my dad wanted me to grow up and go to college and break that cycle of poverty, I always knew that I couldn't do that in a vacuum. I knew that I needed the community to fill the gap for me, because from the day my father passed away, I didn't have a single blood relative in the entire state. So when he died, I had his dream, but I didn't have any family here to support me because they'd all left because they thought the altitude in New Mexico was making his disease progress more rapidly. So they moved out to Florida. And I was here alone at New Mexico State, no support system, no family to fill that gap. And so when my father passed away, community filled the gap. People like you who inspire and pour into others, and organizations, you know, Los Ojos de la Familia, those types of organizations are what provided an opportunity for me to live my father's dream and break that cycle of poverty. They filled the gap. Every day that I have now is a day longer than my dad had. I'm 51 years old now. My dad lived to 49. I was a teenager when I buried him. And so what gives me this energy is knowing that every day I have is a day longer than my dad had, and I better live it with gratitude and in service to others. Like I tell my son, you know, you mentioned Raf.
Yeah.
Well, you know, his name's Rafael. That's my son's name, Rafael Mario Santiago Colon. And Rafael is my father's namesake. My dad's name was Rafael. He was named after my father. And my son knows that I always say this, that I've got a debt that's so deep to the community that I'll never be able to repay it fully, but by gosh, I'm going to die trying. And I mean that. I like these 1,007 days, this is my dream. And during the pandemic, Carson, you're not going to believe this, but Jack, you're the kind of guy that during a pandemic, you're going to clean out the garage. Everything's going to be just right. Right? He's going to have a level, and it's going to be, that bubble's going to be on the center on every box in the garage. I'm not that kind of guy, but my wife, on the other hand, the engineer in the household, who's also a public school teacher, she actually cleaned out the garage. And during that time, she literally found an article from 1987. It's 35 years ago nearly. 1987. And I was getting ready. I'd gone to Boys State and was getting ready to go to Boys Nation. And the journalist said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I said, "Well, I want to live my father's dream. I want to go to college. I want to be the first in my family to graduate. I want to become a lawyer. And then I want to serve the people of New Mexico." I was 17 years old. 35 years later, I went to college. I graduated. I went to law school. I finished. And now I'm serving the people in New Mexico. So when I say living the dream, like Carr says that all the time, living the dream, right? But that's an expression that we all use.
Yeah.
Bicho, right? Like,
Yeah.
living the dream.
Yeah. You know what G2's...
I really am.
You are. You know what's crazy? One thing that stood out what you just said a while ago, you know, my brother passed away when he was 40 years old, right? He got his birthday. He passed away literally 3 weeks after his 40th birthday. And you know, it's crazy. I'm 3 years after that, and it's not even really 3 years. I'm like 2 years into it. And it's crazy because you really stop to think about that. And for me, it was like, holy crap, I passed my brother. But I was so scared when I was 39 years old that something was going to happen at 40. It's crazy how you think about shit like that, right? But those are the real major things. But the other thing is, this is one thing, Brian, I think that when people want to know and why you do this. And this is for me, right? And I'm going to ask you why you do it, and I'm going to tell you this. What is the best thing, and why are you a mentor? Like the level that you are, like you mentor all levels. What is the best thing about mentoring, and what makes you do it, Brian? What is it down when we talk to the gritty? What is it?
Look, people say, "What are your hobbies?" And I say, my hobbies are pouring into others. That's my hobby. Mentoring others, pouring into others, and being able to make that investment. And now I'm getting old enough that I actually see the return on the investment, where these young kids or even these middle-aged leaders have turned into superstars. And for me, there's nothing more gratifying than being able to take somebody from where they are to where they want to be. Look, I tell people all the time, I got 24,000 contacts in this iPhone. If they sit in this iPhone and I don't leverage them for the benefit of everybody I come in contact with, then ¿pa qué? Right? For what? Why have I been on this journey? I've been so blessed, and if I just let it sit in that phone and not leverage it for the benefit of every person that wants me to pour into them, then I'm wasting an opportunity. So I guess I'm just passionate about it because I know it goes back to what I said, right? Like, I didn't have the normal support system. I should have fallen through the cracks. So if I can pour into someone else to make sure and fill the gap for them, then I'm enriched. I always say this, and you know my expression, and they put it on my Cafecito con Colón mug. Now I have a Truth Podcast, Young Millionaires, very fancy, very large coffee cup. Thank you very much. It is true that his coffee cup is bigger than mine. And I'm sure that's not all. You look at my biceps, they're a lot smaller than his. But you know, on the back of my Cafecito con Colón mug, it says what my number one compass is. That is, I am convinced, at 51 years old, I'm absolutely convinced your success in life is directly proportional to the success you help others achieve. If you called up Rafael right now on the phone and said, what's your dad's motto? He would say that.
Right.
And I'm living proof. Like, I am living my dream. I got 500,000 votes. I serve 2.1 million New Mexicans. I go to bed at midnight. I get up at 4:30 or 5 every day. I'm ready to do it 7 days a week. And that energy comes from knowing that I am living my dream and serving others. And there's nothing more gratifying for me. This is it. I was built for this. I was literally built for this. And so, you know, I've got so many stories, Jack. We could spend the 50 minutes talking about kids that I got at C&M because they've been kicked out of UNM for failure to make academic progress. And I get a hold of them and get all their areas of their life straightened out. I helped them create their personal board of directors. Jim Rohn talked about it. Zig Ziglar talked about it. Jack Vigil talks about it. I talk about it. It's like you got to surround yourself with people when you pick up the phone and call them, they got one goal. That goal is to say, yes, how can I help?
Yes. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
It's not about getting another big job where you're laying the conduit for this next big project and you're hoping to. No, there's only one reason you take that phone call. It's to figure out how can you be helpful and say yes.
I got to tell you guys a funny story. I love this stuff, right? So me and Brian, we got close, and and he really didn't know what I did. And one of his intros to me would be like, the general pulls the most wire, puts this in. I said, Brian, no, I'm in network engineering. That's a small subject.
What do I know? Pulling the wire and making it work.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I know.
But I loved it, right? And so people, after these meetings, are going to say, are you an electrical contractor? I'm like, no, we run fiber optic. But I said, we're network engineering. But I love how Brian lays it out there. I said, but this is good because I'm going to start a wiring company just based on that. But I love that. But this is what I'm talking about, right?
But let me close that story, right? Because
okay, yeah.
like the young man who was C&M kicked out, we got all his life all straightened up, set him up with some people that believed in him, put up some guardrails so when he bumped into him, we put him back on track. 2 years later, that young man, after I wrote a letter to the University of New Mexico and said, give this kid a chance, provisionally readmit him for one semester. If he doesn't crank it out, kick him back out, but give him a chance. They gave him provisional admittance to UNM. He is no longer provisionally admitted. His last semester, he had a 3.92 GPA in international studies and political science. He's going to graduate in May, and he's going to get a master's in diplomacy. The guy's going to become a United States Department diplomat. And that kid was at CNN. How enriched could I be? Like, what better story do I have? Like, that's it. Or little Michael Johnson, man. He's getting ready to graduate over there on the west side, and his uncle calls and says, my nephew just needs a little bit of guidance. Could you take him to breakfast? Take him to breakfast. Fast forward 5 years later, that kid who didn't have direction when he was in high school, in 3 years, he's graduating from UNM with a 4.2 GPA. He's got a psychology degree or a psychology major and a political science major. He's going to start law school. He's in Washington, D.C. right now. He's a Fred Harris Fellow. That kid is focused like a laser beam. I got so many of those stories, Jack. It's like I feel like they're books on my shelf, and I just get to look at them and be just so grateful that they've given me an opportunity to be a part of their journey. There's nothing more rewarding for me.
It's true. I shared on this podcast in the past. I watched this YouTube with Denzel Washington, right? He's giving a commencement speech, and he talks about the most gratifying thing you can do in life is giving. And it just makes you feel a certain type of way, right? And I think this is why the Carson's here, right? You think about, I always tease him and say he was a little plant. I started awarding him. Now he's one of the, killing it in real estate, phenomenal business person, doing a crazy job in a house that he's remodeling and all that. And I'm looking at that, we're always talking shit back and forth. But I think it's really awesome when you're able to pour into somebody and then you see that result and you're like, hey, you know what? I got to push that. I may put some professional energy to push that person to do that. You know what I mean? But I think, but ultimately, I think what we both say is what's amazing is that I guess being a mentor for me, I do it because it just gives me that feeling you just explained. I think you explained it better, right?
It's priceless.
It's priceless.
Look, and here's the thing. I couldn't do what I do. People say, oh, you mentored and helped so many people on the journey. And I'm quick to push back a bit. Say, yes, I've been blessed to be able to pour into them. But the only reason I'm able to, because the 24,000 people in this phone still take my phone call.
Yep.
And when I call up Jack and say, I got this young man, his name is Abdiel, and I think you could really take him from where he is to where he wants to be. Now, Abdiel is crushing it in Boston. Why? Because Harmonics gave him a chance. Harmonics gave him a chance. If you didn't take my call and give the guy a break, then he wouldn't be in Boston right now, crushing it. Talking about the work ethic he learned right here.
Let's talk about this. Look, what I love about this, guys, and this is where people get this all mixed up. Brian makes the phone call, but the individual has to put the work. And this is so funny. I read one of my good friends, Rudy, used to be the undersheriff. He was just at the house, and he says, you know, people give me calls and expect that I'm going to give them a free ride. He says they got to be ethical and they got to follow this, but I'm going to make sure they can get in the academy. And then from there, it's up to them, right? And I think that's one thing I like about what you said, Brian, because I'm sure you've mentored people that have started and failed, and then it's like, okay, you can't put too much into it. I'm a little different than you. I think Brian Colon stays more on the track. I'll pull the zip code on you, right? Because and that's why I use that whole NFL deal. But that's awesome. Let's talk about deal, right? He came in, you know, I pounded him. It's not easy working for the general. I have a very high level of what I want in perfection. I'm hard. But, you know, for him calling me and saying and telling you, you know, I'm here in Boston, and this is literally what the general's pace is. It was a little higher down in Harmonics, so now that I'm here, and he has a big-time position in Comcast, right? We're not talking Pee-wee Herman status. But one of the big things I told him, I said, you're only as good as your last fight, and nobody gives a shit. In the big game, in the big NFL game of life, I'm sorry. You play in that East Coast game, it's only what you're doing today and what you accomplish, and you're only remembered for that. So you got to keep on winning every single day, no matter how you feel. You got to have that grit, and that's what most people don't have, is to have that grit. You got that grit, Colon. Like, you know, one thing I want to lead into this question with you is, how do you handle disappointment? I mean, I've been there with you on a large disappointment, right? How do you handle a disappointment of that magnitude? And you know, I'm talking, you know, the mayor's race.
Sure.
You were there. What? Just give it to us. Like, how, for those listeners out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all have a particular lens we look through, and that lens is created and crafted by the journey that we've been on. And I have told you where I started. I mean, blocks of cheese, powdered milk, Section 8 housing, 2 parents who were disabled, burying my parents at a young age, and you know, I know what it is to be so close to the edge that I come home from class and my car's not in the driveway, and it's not because someone borrowed it, it's because it was repossessed. I know what it is to be a couch surfer with a plastic bag and needing my friends to put me up because I didn't have a place to stay. So when you start out from that perspective, it gives you some context. Nothing else is fatal, man.
Right.
I mean,
nothing else applies.
Right, Carson? I mean, that's a lot of context.
Yeah.
And so no matter what, I've had a roof over my, look, I got married 25 years ago. We just celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary. I've been married 25 years and 4.5 weeks. And my wife's a saint, and she has allowed me and given me the energy and the passion for what I do every day, which is serving others. She bought into that a long time ago. We walked from a lot of wealth in order for me to be able to live a life of service, right?
True, true.
Like if she'd have let me go build when I was in the private sector, go on the North Valley, or what do you call it, on Rio Grande, and looking at those, the North Valley, right? Like I'd be working to pay that payment, but she kept me where I needed to be. We live in the old gravel pit. I mean, we're all those folks that used to pull the rock out of that gravel pit. Well, now it's called Vista del Norte. Very modest neighborhood, wonderful place, 1,900 square foot house. We've been there 20 years. She's going to bury me in the backyard. She's never going to let me buy a bigger house. But the truth is, because she kept that perspective, she allowed me to put myself in a position where we don't have to worry about what we're earning because we have enough.
Brian, let's steps into this. Look, this is a statement. you are a true politician that walk the walk and talk the talk. And I'm going to tell you something. When people are in civil service, I give the example of this. If you're living in the house of my magnitude, or you're in the building of my magnitude, you're not in civil service, right? And it shows right there. One thing I love about you is you walk the walk. I mean, I call it your Rolodex, who you are, being the chair of the Democratic Party, what you can reach to benefit yourself isn't there. I mean, I visit you all the time. I mean, I'm giving you shit because you got to replace the shower, right? And I look at this stuff, and I'm telling you, this is really the guy why I get behind him, because ultimately, a guy with this type of Rolodex could literally set it up for himself to go to the next level, and it's not there, right? I mean, you're talking about. I mean, we're laughing, and I've known you to have 2 cars in your whole time. I've turned 24 cars in the time that we've been as friends. And so, and you're here telling me, you know what, this is going to be a big move, 26,000. And I'm thinking, holy shit, that's the cost of the rim of my SV. But when I think about that, it's like even in being the lawyer that you are, I mean, you could be bringing it in major, just the cases. But you know what, you care about the people, and this is what I'm telling you: when someone is doing what they love, this is what I try to really talk about in the truth. You can never truly measure it by monetary gain.
You can't, Jack.
You can't.
I mean, you just can't. From where I came from to where I am, not having to worry about whether the light bill is paid and whether the mortgage is covered, like this is my life is so good. It's so good. I mean, I get to take 100 phone calls a day from people that the system's not working, and I get to fix it. This morning held a press conference, all 3 stations, did KOB. We took a break so I could go do that radio interview. And it's like, I'm showing people that the government is working for them. When we talked about accountability in government, when I took that oath of office 1,007 days ago, I took it very seriously. I'm in the unique position to restore people's faith in government. Carson shouldn't have to worry about whether we've got corrupt public officials out there. He should be worried about whether he's going to close his next sale on his house, right, on that listing he's got. And that's what he gets to do, and he knows I'm out there fighting for him. He knows it didn't matter that the mayor of Las Vegas was a Democrat who supported me during my campaign. She's no longer the mayor. She's a convicted felon. Why? Because my office did good work and we held people accountable. That's the work I've been doing for 1,007 days. There's nothing better. The Office of the Attorney General and the State Auditor are the 2 unique offices that I think have the power to restore people's faith in government. Absolutely. And it's been rocked, right? Like, who has faith in government? Like, we got a lot of work to do to get this right. Yeah. And I get to do that work every day. I mean, I'm living the dream. It's real. I mean, honestly, G2, I think you guys like me, you guys like some of my friends, and we don't really got the faith in government. I'll be honest with you. We're sitting out there, I have a private security. I have a full private security team, right, that rolls with us, and it's kind of crazy. I'm saying I'm living 50 Cent. We're all got the G unit rolling, but we have a full private security because I just don't feel comfortable that we have enough law enforcement, right? And this is what's scary, right? And I think, we talk about this. But the reason all of us have to wake up and smell the coffee is it's so important to do the research by the people that we're appointing to public office. Because this is the scary part, right? Even for me, if I said the hell with it, I don't really give a shit. Well, I own a lot of properties. If the crime goes up, property values will go down. If the economy's not stable, then you know what? That multi-million-dollar property not going to be worth shit. So then I can't have the attitude, I'm just going to get a plane and roll. I'm going to get in my plane and roll, right? Can't have that attitude. But no matter what level you're at, you have to pay attention what's going on at your kitchen table, most important, and then outside your door. And I think, Brian, that's what you really bring, what you're talking about, is are we getting the guys that are watching outside? You're the true plumber, like you just said, right? And it doesn't matter if it's the big time guy who's got I call it an 8 figures behind his name, or it's the guy that's got the no figure behind his name. I mean, you're going to take that phone call, and that's what makes you so unique. That's one thing I got to say. You're the most unique guy at your level. Carson, I want you to chime in on this. You remember we talked about this when you said you reached out to a lot of these mentors, and they were kind of like, "Oh, do this," and they wouldn't reach back. And I reached out. We sat down and had the breakfast. Kind of, you and Brian had that kind of that dialogue. What was your experience? How did that make you feel?
Like the rejection of it, I guess?
Yeah, the rejection part.
Honestly, it was kind of one of those things that I had a bigger vision to know that I was kind of weeding people out, right? Like if there was no connection or if they didn't want to pour the time in me, for me it was, okay, this is a repetition and a numbers game. And kind of same concept I've done in my career as far as that goes is take that rejection, take what they offer, if they offered any, and move on to the next individual to find out who's actually going to be willing to pour into you. Because if I was going to keep beating a dead horse with someone, I mean, how much were they probably willing to open up to me or to mentor me? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that was. But I just saw it as there was one certain thing that I wanted for my life and that I wanted from a mentor. So if someone treated me that way or kind of just said, oh yeah, you're doing good, just keep doing what you're doing, then I kind of just moved forward and said, okay, there's someone out there who's, or maybe I wasn't ready for the mentor at that time, and I had to go through this experience to be able to find the right person and understand what they're willing to teach. It's kind of where I was with all of that.
Did you ever get the I don't got time for you kind of deal?
Yeah, I got that.
Say percentage wise.
Probably 80% of the time, honestly.
Gee, my goodness.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a single person out there that's ever reached out to me. I said, look, I'm never busy. If Carson reaches out to me by text or phone call, he's going to get an instant response.
Exactly.
And he knows that's
Yeah,
true, and I've proven it. And I do that whether it's Carson or whether it's Jack, they're going to get the same level of responsiveness. And I take a lot of pride in that. Mm-hmm. You know, there's people out there say, man, you're the most responsive elected official. I may not be the smartest or the best looking, but I'm going to be the most responsive. And I take that seriously.
What do you think was a turning point for you, Brian, to, I guess, develop that passion, right? Because it's so easy, and like I said, it's 80% of the time where we'll see these people in success in their realm, right? And obviously you yourself, in my opinion, extremely successful in your realm, but you still make the time for, you know, the young kid that's reaching out. Do you think it's because you almost didn't have a mentor like that, or the resources, or I guess where I'm playing devil's advocate to kind of see where your thought process was, as far as you can easily say, well, I didn't have this, so why am I going to offer it to other people? Because unfortunately, that is what happens, right? So what was kind of the turning point where you said, you know what, I don't want to be this person. I want to be able to help.
I mean, I think it's just really early on in my journey. I mean, I think goes all the way back to, I remember in high school, I was a senior in high school, and one of the young guys I cared about, he had gotten kicked out of high school, and he had to go to this early morning hour. And if he didn't show up to that early morning hour, then they weren't going to let him back in. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to pick him up every morning at his house to make sure that he went to school that early morning hour so he could actually graduate. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how it all started, except that I feel like once I saw that guy graduate, like I took pride of ownership. Mm-hmm. Like I take pride of ownership in all the success that I get to be a small part of. Mm-hmm. Now, I will be honest with you. For the most part, it's exceptional when I get somebody like the stories I told you just earlier. I mean, I've got those two, one about the CNM and then Michael. Those are in the last few years. But the truth is, I get a lot of credit, but now 9 out of 10 of the young people I mentor are the Carsons of the world. They're already going to be successful. I may give them a little extra lift under the wings, right? Like I always talk about Lift Up NM, Lift Up New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So I may give a little lift, but the truth is I could never come into your path and you're still going to be successful, Carson. You still have the bones, right? And you're going to make it. So I have to be more intentional, and I am more intentional about reaching out to some of those cases where, like the kid at CNM, right? Where I'm realizing that this guy doesn't have any guardrails. He doesn't have the support system. Mm-hmm. He doesn't understand that he's getting dunning notice on past due student loans while he's sitting at CNM. And I'm like, wait, you're enrolled. Those should be in forbearance. Like, you know, you got a $300 credit card and you're distracted with all this stuff that doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Let's get it all in the right lane, and let's get you focused on what's important, which is finishing this semester. Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to pour into somebody like that and get it done. But to be honest, I have to be more intentional about identifying those, because I got 9 Carsons a week giving me a call. Yeah. And you're all superstars.
And that's the thing too, and that's kind of one thing that I've said on previous episodes on this podcast, and I've said to Jack a lot of times, is I think it takes a certain individual as well to have the willingness to reach out and not think, well, I don't know if I'm, you know, professional enough, or I don't know if I'm well established enough for this person to take, you know, any question or any time out of their schedule to take me serious. And it's kind of finding those individuals that don't even understand to reach out to or even know what a mentor is, you know, and
that's why I got to go eyes wide open, right? Like I need to be making sure that when people come into my line of sight, that I'm actively open. You know, I talk to Jack. We talk a lot about relationships, and I think that the universe or God, you know, I'm very spiritual.
Yes.
But I think God has a lot in store for a lot of people. But if they're not open to that, they can't receive it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I talk to a lot of young leaders like you, and just say, look, you've got to be open. When you walk in a room, you got to be open for something magical to happen, something spectacular to happen, and receive it. You know, I feel like ever since I took office, I feel like I know Jack's the athlete, the master athlete. I don't have an athletic bone in my body. I mean, I was good at bowling. That tells you what I'm good at. But you know, the athletes, they talk about being in the zone, right? Others talk about, you know, if they're into the vibrational force and energy, they talk about being in the vortex. Whether you call it the zone or the vortex or my sweet spot. Like I'm in my sweet spot in this service role.
Yeah.
Where I can pick up the phone, and Jack said I was the plumber because he's heard me say it a million times. Like I want the people of New Mexico to think of me as the plumber. Like if the drain's clogged, don't worry about whether it's my job to fix it. Just call me because I'll either fix it myself or I'll find someone to do it. Can. And that's the beauty of being in elected office. That's the best part. Everybody takes my phone call. The auditor calls, you're going to take the call. Right?
You're taking the phone call, baby.
You're taking that call.
You're taking that phone call. You know
they might get a little nervous when they see it come up.
The beauty is that you got thousands of civil servants out there that honestly are trying to do a good job. So when I get that issue in front of them, they want to address it. Partly maybe because I'm calling, but the other part is most of them have their heart in the right place. They're working in the public sector because they want to serve others. Right. And so, look, I think, let me just close a loop on the disappointment, because I've had them, right? Like, in what I do, look, if Harmonix goes out to go bid that big job at the base, and you're the top 3, and then all of a sudden you came in a close second, you didn't get that contract, the whole world doesn't know. When I go out there and I say, I want that prize, I want that opportunity, either I close the deal and everybody's saying, I didn't close the deal. But when I lose, everybody knows I lost. Like there's nothing secret about my journey.
Yeah, you're on
like
the big
my
stage.
wins and losses are on the big screen, right? Like I don't
literally.
that's literally.
When I went to Mass after I lost, this goes all the way back to, this is kind of funny. When I went to Mass right after I lost, that was back at the Aquinas days, Aquinas Newman Center. I used to go to Mass there with my family. And I remember losing that lieutenant governor's general election. I won the primary, as you remember, heavily contested 5-way race, 3 elected officials, one of the best bureaucrats, Lawrence. I mean, it was a tough race. We won by 5 points. And of course, we lost the general election to Susana Martinez and to John Sanchez. I'll tell you, when I went to Mass after losing that election in November, I swear I felt like the light was shining on me, and everybody in that room was looking at me and just going, man, you lost your race. Like the whole world knew, and I felt like the whole world was looking at me, and it was tough. It was tough to get up from the ground on that one. And all I can tell you is that what cured me was pouring into the philanthropy landscape of New Mexico. I got involved in more nonprofits after losing that race than you can shake a stick at. I mean, Los Ojos is front and center in my world and in Jack's world, and I'll always do everything I can for that organization. But it was Albuquerque Community Foundation, the United Way Central New Mexico, the New Mexico Hispanic Bar. I was out there serving, and it cured me. It cured the pain in my heart because I just wanted to serve. And I figured, well, if I can't serve in public office because I lost this race, I'm going to just get in a different vehicle and I'm going to hit the gas as heavy as I can. And I raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for nonprofits in this state, and it cured me. Because for me, it's just about service. I don't have to have a title to serve, but I feel like I am where I'm supposed to be. I'm loving every day, and I'm grateful for every day.
You know, it's crazy when you said that you're on the big screen, right? I mean, that's like literally being like a professional athlete. I mean, LeBron James loses everyone in the world, and you just took it like a champ. And I think one thing is like, you know, when you have those people in your life, win or lose, they're right there. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. They're in the corner. But I think, G2, one thing that you really bring to people is, well, my grandfather would say, when you fall on your knees, you get up, you dust those, and you get back up walking until you start running again. I mean, you would do it better than anybody, you know, taking that. And, you know, that's been an inspiration for me, that watching you, it's those defeats, watching someone take a defeat like that, get back up. And I remember we're in your corner saying, you're going to get your ass in there, you're going to run for this freaking Auditor's game, and you're like, no matter, so you're gonna get in. We're signing you up for the next fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you have to have those people that are not like, okay, I think it's better if you do this. No, you got to get your ass in there and you fight that game. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the beauty of it. I mean, talk about being in the arena, no, and getting dusted, and I was on my back. I mean, that mayor's race obviously didn't turn out the way that I thought that I hoped, and now it, of course, was a blessing in disguise because now I serve people all over the state instead of just Albuquerque. That was a heavy loss because it was just me, right? Like when I lost the lieutenant governor's race, people said, no, you won your race. You won the nomination for lieutenant governor. People don't go vote for lieutenant governor. They vote for governor, right?
Yes.
So you didn't lose that race. Someone else did. So psychologically, that's kind of how I processed it, no? But when the mayor's race, it was me. And yeah, it was a 7-way race or whatever, and I could rationalize. But the beauty of the mayor's race was that it gets back to looking around and seeing who's still serving on your personal board of directors.
Yeah.
Who's still standing up and saying, we're still with you. We're not going anywhere. Like, yeah, you just spent, I think, what are we spending that race? Over $750,000. And I don't have the feria. We already talked about that. So every race that I run, I'm with my hat in my hand. I got my cachucha out there. Por favor, otra vez, right? Yeah. It's like, I need it again. I need your help. Whether it's $5 or $5,000, I need your help. And those people that invested that $750,000 in me so I could have an opportunity to live my dream and serve, it was hard to look them in the eyes.
Yeah.
But I remember which ones fell off. And I remember the ones that were standing around me and picking me up and saying, we're going to do this again because you're not done.
Right.
And so for me, that was huge because, like I said, a very public loss. But you figure out who's in it because they want access to a position or some capacity, or who are in it because they believe in you and what you can do. And so that was a huge blessing, losing that race.
Or you get those people, G2, that just actually want to see you achieve your dream no matter what it is. And this is what I tell people when I'm not into the politics, but that's why I was there for you. I mean, when we sat down that cigar shop, and I mean, we cried as men together, and you brought me, and I was like, you know what? I'm getting behind this guy. You could have been selling cotton candy at the fair, and I still would have gone behind you to build the stand, right? And I think those are very far and few, and people don't realize that there's some people that just actually want to just hanging with you and seeing you smile and saying, hey, this guy made it. You may not understand what the hell's going on, but you're just there because you're just there for the ride, right? And I think that's what most people don't understand. And then what happens is there's more about sitting with those people that I call them the fans. And once you're not there, like I look at this, right? I mean, I'm even guilty of this. Tom Brady moved over. I moved over with him, right? I got the Patriots sitting up, but I'm not no longer with the Patriots. Half my team's over there. LeBron was over there at the Cavs, and I moved to the Lakers. I'm with, so we move around, and that's exactly it. We're not really behind the team. We're behind the individual. And that's one thing that people don't realize. And so that's, I think, a focus that you've been able to realize. Let me ask you this. What do you think were your top 3 or influential people in your life from your childhood up to now?
Yeah. I've had so many people pour into me on the journey, but first and foremost, my parents. I mean, they didn't go to college. They worked hard. My mom and dad, like I said, were both disabled. I mean, I saw my dad hobble along on those Canadian crutches, the back brace. This is in the 70s, and he was getting pumped full of steroids just to keep him alive. And this was early in the steroid game, and I remember he'd be in so much pain, and he'd be taking those steroids, and all of a sudden, he would just lose it. And I remember thinking, my dad is like the Hulk. He just lost control, and he would be so angry and aggressive and really kind of scary, out of control. And now, of course, we know what that is. It's roid rage. Like, that's real. Mm-hmm. That's no joke. That's not just an expression. That is real. And my dad had to fight those demons of that pain, and then trying to mix a cocktail that alleviated the pain but left him in control, right? And so to know what he went through every day, because he didn't live a day without pain. Muscular dystrophy just sucks the life out of you. And so no matter how hard I have it, he had it harder, and and he pushed through for his children. Even from the day I was born, my father, when I was born, my dad, not everybody knows this story, but my dad was a severe alcoholic when I was born. He was a functioning alcoholic, but what he would do is he was a very good cocinero. He was a chef in New York, and he worked at a fancy diner, and he would go on these 3 days alcohol binges, and he would get fired from work, right? Because he would be out for 3 days on these binges. And the problem is that the diner would take a dive in sales when he wasn't cooking. He was that good. And so then the diner would bring him back. So there were no consequences for his actions. So my mom was living with this raging alcoholic. And when I was born in January of 1970, I have a telegraph where my dad essentially wrote to my mom through a telegraph or telegram. What do they call it? Telegram? Telegraph?
Yeah.
Right? And it, let me see my son. So he wasn't there when I was born. And my mom made a deal. And she said, look, you have a choice. You can choose the bottle or you can choose your son. And my dad chose me. And from that moment on, my parents lived in the basement, I guess, of my grandparents' house. And my dad had to clock in at 8 o'clock and clock out at 5 or whatever. And if he was a minute later, had to drop alcohol in his breath when he came in, my grandfather met him at the door. He wasn't getting in. And he wasn't going to get to see his son, who was me. And until he died when he was 49, and I never saw my dad drink.
Wow.
So from my birth on, he walked away from that alcohol and never went back. So I don't know why I shared that just now, except to say that my dad was a giant, man. And he persevered through so much.
He impacted you. I think
he impacted me so much.
That's the impact, right? I guess when it is when I think of people that inspire me, it's not really, people like to use that word loosely, but it's an impact. Who impacted you? And sometimes it's not about success. When you watch somebody at the bottom and they can persevere, it's a major impact. And I think that's it. I mean, that impact was just, that trajectory for you is the fuel, right? It's a fuel that's unexplainable.
Yeah, it is. And then there's so many people along the way in the journey. I can't even just say 3 people because there's so many, whether it was Larry Sheffield or whether I'm the little student senator at New Mexico State University as a freshman down there, and my father dies, and I don't have the money to go to Florida for his funeral. And the guys and gals in the Senate take up a collection to pay for my airline ticket. This is back in the day. Airline tickets were ridiculous.
Yeah,
you're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And Barbara Hubbard, who was the founder of the Pan Am Center essentially down there, and she used to sign all the acts. She's friends with Dwight Yoakam and George Strait, and she was with Brooks and Dunn and Reba before they got huge. Barbara Hubbard's a legend, a living legend.
Oh, yeah.
Like we got Jack Vigil, local legend as named by ABQ, the magazine, and everybody else. You're a living legend up here, but you go down south, she's a legend. And she's writing a check to match what the kids in the Senate are raising so that I can go bury my dad. Like, talk about who influenced me. Like, these are it's more moments in my life that were
it's impact.
Right?
It's impact.
Like it's collective. Community raised me.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just 1 or 2 people. It was like the whole community. It was the Sonia and them that let me sleep on their couch when I was at New Mexico State in Las Cruces because I didn't have a place to stay. Like literally, I didn't have a place to stay. And they let me stay on their couch. Which I just can't.
What's kind of great about this, Brian, I think this is really on like Carson's generation, right? And I like to pick on his generation a lot. We're listening to you here, and you had all these different hardships, and you get the individual saying, I can't make it. And none of us have gone through Brian Colon. I'm thinking here, man, I'm almost getting emotional here, and I'm thinking, holy shit, this guy had to do this. And when I look at myself, if I didn't make it, I just have to take a stick and beat myself down. None of those hardships, right? You got to imagine, when I think about that, that's where you major. Even like, you look at Nikki G, you look at Carson, they had more having to actually come up. But I think about that and I'm thinking, wow, right? And it is humans. And this is where it all goes back to, if we all got together and we did one positive thing for somebody a day, how much more beautiful would the world be? I'm gonna make you guys ass laugh. When you first come into the road, I don't know if you noticed that stop sign used to be leaning down. And that stop sign had been leaning down now for probably about a month. So I got it in my head and said, you know what, get me out of the car. I got out of the car. And so I compacted the stop sign. I bent it back, put it down, the stop sign's back up and running.
How did I know that this podcast was going to go back to your guns?
Hey,
I
no,
knew it.
no.
See, he broke out the guns and he straightened the stop sign.
was
It
a
only
level.
took 45 minutes, but we got there.
We put the
Me
straight.
and Brian had a bet on the
How long it would take to get to the guns? We got to the guns, baby.
Hey, 45 minutes thing. Hey,
No, keep going, Jack.
No,
I'm
but,
sorry.
but,
Go ahead.
but you know what I'm saying is that, you know, it's those little positive things.
Yeah.
And I tell my employees, like, why wouldn't you, you know, I'm going to give you a great story, right? I use this. We were at the U Nation and we installed a network and we made friends. And that, when you're doing something out there, you're doing life-changing. No internet and all that. And so one of the guys comes out and they like literally get down, they hug us. And so I'm sitting down and Keith is like, he kind of slides to me. He says, hey, you know, can you take a look at our network? And I said, Keith, we're not leaving the U Nation till everything is complete. So you don't have to worry. Your problem is my problem. And you know what? That's not part of our contract. But at the end of the day, if we have certain knowledge that we can give or help, and we just do it, how would it have taken them? You know, I mean, Nikki was there on the game, and, you know, one of the things I used was like, it was a funny saying. I said, don't worry, right? And they started saying that the whole day. And then I showed them about fiber optics on this little cardboard, and I drew it all out. And he wrote in there and said, I want you right there, don't worry. When we were able to deliver that, when I walked away, it meant more to me that I touched them than actually making the money or on that project. And I thought, I'm actually leaving an impact. And that's what I think is amazing, is if you can be an impact for people in your life or who you cross, then you've made it. If you can't make an impact and you're only impacting yourself, then you're not really living. And that's what you've actually made me better at myself. I went to that time period, Brian, where I lost a lot of hope in humanity, just in general. And I got to the point where I was like, you know, I got brains, I got bronze, I got this, I made money, I made a lot of money, and I really don't want to do this anymore. And you actually inspired me and said, hey, don't let these downfalls hold you back from helping people. You're an impact. Like, you're one of those guys in my life where I put in there like a pillar impact, right? And so I sit there and I say, and I'm glad you really just actually brought a chapter in my mind. It's not influences, it's impacts. Who are the people? And it could be a slew of people that impacted you in that one time that you needed, good or bad, right? Could be good or bad. Brian, let me ask you this question. What do you think people most misunderstand about you?
Well, let's see. I think what it is I think people, let me put it to you this way. I'll give you an example. Okay. I'll tell you what happened. Because this is the embodiment of what I'll tell you, what I think is the biggest thing people misunderstand about me. Now, before Carson was born, there was this thing called email, and no one had it on their phones. You used to have to go to like a computer lab to go check your email, right? Like you go down. When I was in law school, that's what we did. We went to the computer lab in the law library. We checked our email. So I go down to the computer lab. I open up my email, and the subject line was all that came up back in the day. There's no preview screen, nothing like that. It just said, I give up. It's our third year of law school. I give up. And it came from Britt. I won't give Britt's last name, but Britt was a very no-nonsense, very smart woman. I mean, she wore work boots to law school. She was a nonconformist. She wore what she wanted to wear. She chewed tobacco. I mean, this woman she marched to her own drummer. So I was like, I give up. So I opened it up, and she said, Dear Brian, she said, I give up. No one can fake it for 3 years. No one can fake being this kind, this nice for as long as you have. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you call me. The answer is yes, I'm yours. And that's what I think people misunderstand. People say, man, this guy can't always be that happy. This guy's like a used car salesman on steroids. Like, he's always up.
Yes.
Like, he's always got the positive energy going, right? And I think people misunderstand that for me not being able, for me being disingenuous.
Right.
Like, this is me.
That is you.
Like, this is me.
Yeah.
Carson, you've seen me a million times. John, you've seen me a million times. I mean, like, this is me. I am this in love with my life. I'm this in love with my opportunity to serve. Like, it's one thing to say I'm living the dream and it's an expression, but I am literally living what I dreamed 35 years ago I'd get to do. So I lived my father's dream and now I'm living my dream. So this is truly how happy I am. This is how positive I am. And so I think people mistake me as, he's a slick used car salesman. He's the best backslapper. He's going to try and sell me a Cadillac. No, this is me. Like, when you call me at 6 in the morning, this is me. When you call me at 6 at night, this is me.
As a matter of fact, you would suck at sales because if someone came in need, you would actually sell for a loss and you'd end up paying for it.
I know.
So
Rafael, you know what Rafael's expression is? My son says, he said, Dad, we're never going to be rich. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, we're rich in love. I said, your mom's here, you're here, we're here, we got everything we need. He said, no, Dad, you don't get it. He said, we're never going to be rich. I said, what are you talking about? He says, because for every dollar you make, you donate $2 to a nonprofit organization. He said, we're never going to be rich, Dad. He said, but don't worry, I'll take care of that part.
we used to have a running joke with some friends and saying, don't open Brian's email because it's going to cost you money. And then the second thing is, I say, you know what, Brian? So, people guys carry a big water. I carry my checkbook. So anytime I went to a Brian Colon event, I left my wallet and my checkbook because he was going to put me on the spot. And I've been in some big spots. Like, we're talking 1,000 spots, right? And so I used to laugh, but I was behind him because he's such a great guy. Brian, one of my last questions for you is, I got the 10 rules of success, right, with the Jen put together. Which one do you think really stands out to you for, everybody out there? Or which one do you like? Which one do you like on what I live by?
I think what I'd have to say is there's a couple that I like.
Okay.
You got to have hard work. You got to have the grit. You got to have the determination. You got to have the focus, and you got to maintain. You got to have people that help you regain that focus if you go out of focus. And then number two, I think this. I'm like, you got to be here and now. I'm not worried about where I have to be at 6 o'clock. I'm happy to be right here with the 4 people in this room that are making this opportunity possible for me to be able to communicate with others and hopefully inspire somebody along the way. Look, every day I try and get through the day, and hopefully I've inspired somebody with my work, with my smile. It's harder now with some face masks, but I truly try and lift up people when I come into their path. And so for me, it's like, be present. When you meet somebody, people say, how do you remember everybody's name? Like, how do you do that? You're like a walking Rolodex. And I'm like, names are important. And so if you are going to be present and somebody takes a minute to meet you, you have an obligation to be there, tune in, and at least remember their name is the General Jack TV Hill.
You know what's crazy, G2? I think one thing you just said is, I've always told Carson this, you're never too busy to give somebody your undivided attention for 1 minute. I don't care if you're a homeless guy. That's one thing I live by my whole life. I can't remember names for shit. But one thing I can do is, when you meet with me, I don't care what walk of life you are, I'm going to make you feel like $1 million, because I'm like, the things about me we have very similar is we're always the same tone. I may not be as uppity as you and as good, but I'm always going to be positive, and you're never going to see weakness. You're only going to be strength. Guys, thank you for tuning in on the Truth Podcast. Having Brian Colon, one of my good friends. What an amazing, for the first, the truth is back. And what an opening. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we're out.
See you guys next week.